Hello everyone, it's Mimi here. BMS working in the NHS. And today's video will be about hematoxylin staining with and without EOSIN staining, which is part of the IBMS specialist portfolio in cellular pathology. So, just a quick introduction to this video. It will be short and sweet, I promise. I will discuss indicative repertoire, knowledge requirements, competence requirements, reflective statement, evidence of achievement, Q&A suggestions, supporting evidence ideas and some helpful tips that can make your portfolio really good. With all that said, I hope you will enjoy the content of my video and I hope you will learn a lot. So let's dive into the subsection. The portfolio offers indicative repertoire for this subsection that includes hematoxylin and EOSIN, PTAH or phosphotungstic acid hematoxylin, and Weigert's hematoxylin. Knowledge requirement is what it is expected of you to know and understand to demonstrate your knowledge is at the specialist level. Think about what knowledge you had as a Band 5 BMS. How would that differ to the knowledge as a Band 6 BMS? That specialist level of knowledge would allow you to troubleshoot, problem solve, verify, validate, help others and maintain high-quality service. Let's have a look at the first knowledge requirement, which is for you to know different types of hematoxylin formulae. What are different types of hematoxylin formulae? Can you name examples for each? How do they differ and when would you use each one of them? What staining methodology are they used in? Consider alum, like Meyer-Harris's, iron, like Weigert's or Verhoef's, tungsten, like phosphotungstic acid heme, molybdenum, like Thomas's, or lead. Also consider the key components in the formulation like oxidizers used to convert hematoxylin to hematein, which is an active dye, like air and light or sodium iodate, mordants that improve binding of the dye tissue like iron or alum, acids that refine staining specificity and selectivity like acetic acid, or stabilizers that prevent scum formation like glycerol. The second knowledge requirement is for you to understand the hematoxylin to hematein oxidation process and its control. What is hematein? What is the oxidation process of hematoxylin to hematein? How would you control this oxidation process? Consider natural oxidation by air and light, chemical oxidation by sodium iodate or potassium permanganate, process involving loss of hydrogen, conversion from colorless to dark red-brown solution, pH adjustment with acids, stabilizers like glycerin, storage, temperature, aging. I think there might be a misspelling in the portfolio as it states hematin not hematein. I believe it should be hematein not hematin, as hematein is oxidized hematoxylin, whereas hematin is a brown pigment formed by decomposition of hemoglobin. The third knowledge requirement is for you to know advantages, disadvantages, and use of hematoxylins made with the following mordants: alum, iron, lead. What is mordant and how does it work? What mordants can be used in association with hematoxylin? How do different mordants influence staining characteristics of hematoxylin? What are advantages and disadvantages of each mordant? Consider affinity, stable linkage, final color, versatility, stability or instability, ease of use, primary use, contrast, complexity, selectivity, toxicity, and so on. The fourth knowledge requirement is for you to know staining mechanism of alum hematoxylin. What is the staining mechanism of alum hematoxylin? Consider oxidation to form hematein, mordant to act as a bridge between the tissue and the dye, lake formation to form aluminum hematein complex, tissue affinity to anionic or basophilic structures like DNA or RNA, staining mode, regressive or progressive, bluing to neutralize excess acid and convert soluble red dye to insoluble blue complex, and counterstaining to provide contrast. The fifth knowledge requirement is for you to know principles of hematoxylin and EOSIN staining and the value of it as the primary diagnostic stain in cellular pathology. What is the principle of H&E staining? Consider staining mode, color, affinity, stain structures, contrast, and steps involved. What is the value of H&E staining as a primary diagnostic stain? Consider clear visualization, providing diagnostic foundation, context for further staining and baseline for advanced staining, cost-effectiveness, durability, versatility, providing detailed morphology, efficiency, and so on. The sixth knowledge requirement is for you to review cases and material microscopically for internal and external quality control. How would you assess quality of H&E stain section? What are the tissue areas you would focus on? Consider color consistency, nuclear detail, uniformity of staining, presence of background staining, presence of nonspecific staining, presence of various shades of EOSIN staining, UK NICA's assessment criteria, documentation. The seventh knowledge requirement is for you to know about the use of automated staining machines. Do you perform automated or manual H&E staining? What are the benefits of automated staining? Consider efficiency, throughput, consistency, quality, cost-effectiveness, safety, workflow, cross-contamination, scalability, and so on. The eighth knowledge requirement is for you to monitor the quality of HAEMATOXYLIN and EOSIN staining. How do you monitor quality of H&E staining in your laboratory? What are the common quality issues associated with H&E staining? How would you resolve them? Consider daily monitoring, record keeping, change of reagents, digital image analysis, IQC and EQA slides, verification and validation of reagents. The ninth knowledge requirement is for you to know risks and hazards associated with the preparation and disposal of reagents used in HAEMATOXYLIN and EOSIN staining. What are the risks and hazards associated with use, preparation, and disposal of reagents used during H&E staining? How would you minimize them? Consider health hazards, physical hazards, environmental hazard, disposal methods used, risk assessments, regulatory bodies like COSH, HSE, or RITTER, substitutes available to reduce risks and hazards, preventive measures like PPE, ventilation, waste segregation, and safe handling. Competence requirement is basically a combination of knowledge, skills, and experience one needs to perform a job to a satisfactory standard and level. Your chosen evidence should demonstrate these competence requirements. The following competence requirements need to be met for this section. The first competence requirement is for you to follow demonstration methods accurately. How do you perform H&E staining in your lab? Do you use manual method? If so, how do you know you are following the demonstration method accurately? Consider SOPs, method used, quality control, use of control material, training, competency. The second competence requirement is for you to select and use the correct HAEMATOXYLIN and EOSIN solution, maintaining appropriate records. What HAEMATOXYLIN and EOSIN solutions do you use in your lab? Which H&E staining methods do you use them for, and why? How do you maintain appropriate record documentation for H&E staining? Consider rapid H&E staining for FS, routine automated H&E staining, manual H&E staining, solutions that are used for each method, record keeping. The third competence requirement is for you to select and use the appropriate control materials, maintaining audit trails, as appropriate. What control material do you use for H&E staining and why? How do you maintain audit trail for control material used? How do you produce appropriate control material for H&E staining? Consider tissue types you would use, verification, validation of control material, record keeping for control blocks and control slides, disposal of control material, traceability, and audit trail. The fourth competence requirement is for you to use appropriate microscopy techniques to visualize methods. What type of microscope do you use to visualize H&E? Consider light microscopy, magnification, Kohler's illumination, digital image assessment. The fifth competence requirement is for you to assess stain sections for quality. How would you assess H&E stain section for quality? What steps would you take? How is H&E slide assessed during EQA assessment? Consider color consistency, nuclear detail, uniformity, specificity, presence of background, consistency of staining, presence of nonspecific staining, shades of EOSIN staining present, and EQA assessment. The sixth competence requirement is for you to resolve any problems associated with the staining method, including root cause analysis, as appropriate. What are the common problems associated with H&E staining? How would you resolve them? How would you record them? Consider investigation, problem identification, corrective actions to fix the issue, preventive actions to minimize problems from reoccurring. Consider possible problems like poor staining intensity, poor specificity of staining, artifacts like uneven staining, hazy slides, nuclear bubbling, presence of deposits or precipitate on the slide, reagent contamination, and so on. The seventh competence requirement is for you to dispose of waste reagents safely. How do you dispose staining reagents safely? What disposal risks are associated with HNE staining reagents? Consider licensed contractors used by your lab, waste segregation, safety data sheet of reagents that often state disposal ways, risk assessments, local policies, and regulations that are followed, HNS risks associated with reagents like flammability, corrosivity, environmental toxicity. The eighth competence requirement is for you to perform basic maintenance on automated staining machines and slide cover slippers. What is the basic maintenance of the HNE stainer and cover slipper used in your laboratory? How would you record it? Consider SOPs, reagent change, routine cleaning of the equipment, regular decontamination, monitoring of reagent evaporation and reagent levels, reagent rotation, stain filtering, calibration if needed, associated record keeping and documentation. Each section also contains reflective statement which is asking you, the candidate, to summarize your role in the laboratory in the context with each section. When you complete all the subsections within this section, you will be required to write a reflective statement. You also needs to write a personal reflection on your training and why you chose your evidence. To prepare for that, write a smaller reflective statement for each subsection. What is your role in context of this subsection within the laboratory? What does your evidence demonstrate? Also write a smaller justification as to why you chose your evidence for this subsection. Also write what was your training like when it comes to this subsection. Writing a smaller reflective statement at the end of each subsection will then make it much easier at the end of the section. Each subsection also has evidence of achievement. This is a part where your training officer signs you off as competent and fit to practice as a BMS at the specialist level. Training officer will confirm that you can work in accordance with local SOPs relevant to this section. They will also confirm that you have answered questions set by them to test knowledge and skills relevant to this section. And they will confirm that your chosen evidence demonstrates your competence relevant to this section. You will need to be signed off as competent by internal assessor for this section. This can be your training officer, senior BMS overseeing this section, or a training lead. Questions should be set by the training officer. They need to be based around the knowledge requirements, relevant for each subsection. They should allow the candidate to demonstrate their understanding in each subsection. The questions should be specific and relevant to the candidate's in-house practice. They should also allow the candidate to demonstrate their specialist knowledge. If you would like to see specific example questions, please have a look at the video for trainers. Link will be included in the video description. These are some ideas for supportive evidence you will have to submit to demonstrate your competence in this area. Some more ideas for supportive evidence to demonstrate your competence in this area. Some more ideas for supportive evidence to demonstrate your competence in this area. I would also like to share with you some helpful tips that can make your portfolio look really good. Try to present the information in various formats such as tables, pictures, photographs, diagrams, flowcharts, graphs, or even videos, if you can. This nicely breaks down a lot of text that is usually present in specialist portfolios. Try to make it a little bit more interesting to the reader, which will be your training officer and eventually the assessor. Try to put yourself in their shoes. How would you like to read hundreds of pages of plain text? There is a saying I really like, and it goes like this: a picture is worth 1,000 words. I will make a video. I will share with you my evidence I used for my portfolio back in the day. Hopefully that will help. Also try to use various types of evidence, not just one type, like case studies for each subsection. You could use experiments, case studies, annotated results, annotated photographs of you performing tasks, evidence of troubleshooting, annotated EQA results, non-conformances, validation and verification as comparisons of different approaches and their pros and cons, control material production, certificates of course attendance with reflective statements, annotated images or charts, and so on. Try to bring in your personality. Think about the ways you like to learn best. If you like experimenting, perform experiments. Like troubleshooting, perform troubleshooting. Choose something that demonstrates your understanding, knowledge, skills, and how you apply this in your practice. And one more thing, keep the competence requirements in mind when you selecting your evidence. Good evidence will tick off several requirements. And this brings me to the end of today's video. Hopefully you now have a better understanding about the knowledge and competence requirement for this section. And I hope you also have a better idea what evidence you can choose to demonstrate your competence. And my final take-home message? Keep those requirements in mind when answering questions and selecting your evidence. Bye for now.